Welcome to week 3 of the Aftertalk, where each week we are going to be talking about the sermon that Pastor JJ preached in our Love, Sex, and Marriage series that we have called Whole Heart. Each week we're going to be unpacking the sermon and talking about things singleness, dating, engaged, married, in between, and all the complicated things about relationships and how to do them God's way. My name is Jayleen, and I'm joined here with Pastor JJ and Pastor Liz, and of course, Zach.
What's up?
The message this week was titled The Heart Behind Sex. So we're going to be looking at what the Bible says about sex. Instead of what your friends say or what society says,
Right.
what does God have to say about it?
Yeah.
So let's get into some questions. Can I selfishly choose one first? Is
Sure,
that cool?
yeah, do it.
For
The first
sure.
one is, we are all made in the image of God. Can you talk about why that's important to understand in regards to lusting over others?
Well, there's probably a lot of ways to tackle that question. I would say it begins with treating that individual with respect. If someone is made in the image of God, then how would you treat God?
Yeah.
And
Yeah, that's really good.
I think that lust tends to devalue a person as an object, something to be taken. I think I preached a while last week and then this week too, but to love is to give and to lust is to take. And so when you understand that someone is made in the image of God, you don't just want to take from them. You don't want to use them. You want to give to them. And you want to honor them and value them as they need to be. And so for me, it comes down to honor and giving.
Yeah.
How about you?
Yeah, I think when I think about that, I'm reminded of, I've heard people say things like when you're dating someone, you know, like whether it's a guy dating a girl dating a guy, you should treat them like if you have a little sister, think of it that way. Like, how would you treat your little sister? Like, I mean, you're not thinking of your date as your little sister, but in the sense that how would you treat them?
honor
Like,
Yeah.
you would honor them. And then understand that if they're not the one for you, then there's somebody else's spouse. So
Yeah,
you got to
that's
be
great.
careful how you treat that person because, you know, maybe they're not the one for you and you're doing things that you wouldn't do when, you know, with a spouse. Like, there's someone else's spouse. Like, you got to think of it that way and just treat them with respect.
Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah.
Something that you said one time in our MIT small group that you led was you said one day you're going to give an account on how you treated God's people.
Yeah.
And that stuck with me so much when you said it that day. But I took it like even a step further of like, Lord, I'm going to give an account of how I thought about your people.
Yeah.
And I want to even be accountable to myself and the way I think
Yeah.
because he hears those thoughts. And I want God to know that I'm honoring him even in privacy, even in my mind.
Yeah.
I want to be honoring and step forward in that. And so I just keep that in mind in relation to the question of image of God. I want to think of those people that way because I'm going to answer to that one
The
day.
context for that lesson was where God says, when I was hungry, you fed me. When I was in jail, you came to visit me. When I was naked, you clothed me. And then they answered, when did we ever clothe you when you were naked? When did we ever feed you when you were hungry? And he said, when you did it to the least of these, you did it to me. And so to know that the way that we treat people who are made in the image of God, that God is like it's like how you're treating God.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's just a very sober, realization.
Yeah, such a good
Completely.
perspective.
Oh my goodness.
But we had so many questions
Yes.
that people submitted. So majority of today's conversation is going to be what you guys were asking.
Yeah.
And so the first question is
Was this the most questions asked of all the weeks?
most, yeah, but also like the juiciest
Talk about
too.
sex,
That-
baby.
Like how do we
Let's talk
narrow it
about you.
down?
Totally.
It can easily be a 2-hour long conversation,
goodness.
but we're just gonna see where it goes.
Let's talk about
I knew it. I knew you were going to go there. I'm like, is he going to go there?
Put it in the chat. Who is it?
Dang it.
Who is it if you know?
Okay, so
I know, but I'm not going to say. I know. I'm not going to say. Let them answer.
Back to Jesus.
my past is full of sexual sin and I am ashamed. How do I heal from it and tell my significant other? But then I also want to add, if you were someone getting to know someone, what point in the dating phase should you disclose your past history?
Yeah, because that's not an opening date
Right.
conversation.
For sure.
I don't think sex.
Don't lead with it.
Yeah, sex shouldn't be one of the things that we discuss until much later in the
Right.
relationship, and everybody has a different timeline. I'm tempted to say when things get serious, but then again, I feel like serious can be taken subjectively. But I would say when you are seriously considering marrying somebody, if you're a guy or a girl, because now anybody can propose, but if you were a guy or a girl and you were getting ready to propose and you had the ring, like I would think like, all right, if you're getting ready to buy that ring, before you buy this ring, this
Yeah.
conversation needs to be had.
Yeah.
Not everything needs to be said on the first thing, on the first date, but everything needs to be said before you get to the altar.
Yeah.
For sure.
Everything needs to be said before you
sure.
get to the altar.
Right.
So somewhere between
Yep.
the first date and the altar,
Yeah.
that conversation has to happen. And the
Yeah.
reason why we want to save that conversation for later on in the relationship is by talking about sexual things early, you begin to open doors for sexual things to take place.
Yeah.
So there are some types of conversations that we just need to honor each other. We need to honor
Right.
our bodies. We need to not open any doors for temptation.
Yeah.
So I don't want to talk about that just right now, right yet, because I don't
Yeah.
want my mind to get there. I still want to get to
Yeah.
know you, the individual, the person, but it should come up. It's a part of getting to know somebody,
Yeah.
and it's not something that you should hide. Although I can understand why someone would want to if they have had a
Yeah.
very filled sexual past. To
Yeah.
that, I would say this: you want somebody who loves you for all of you.
Yes.
Correct.
And I have met some guys in the church who could not get past the sexual history of the woman that they were dating.
Wow,
Right. And
okay.
vice
Could
versa.
not, and vice versa.
Yep.
Yeah.
I have heard that, and my heart breaks. I want to look at those guys and be like, I'm grateful that God didn't take that same attitude when He came to save you.
Yeah.
I'm grateful that your record was not so bad that He
Right.
was like, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I can't be one with you.
Yeah.
Right.
But He came to be one with us. I think
Yeah.
looking at sex from that lens, that it's the unification of, that is an image. Paul tells us it's an image of the church and Christ, that they become one. And so, yeah, like, thank you that you're willing to take me just as I am with all my stuff.
Yeah.
But I also respect that you knew yourself enough.
Yeah.
That you were aware
Yeah.
enough. That you didn't get into the relationship
Right.
thinking, oh, I'm just going to look past it and not really deal with it. If you
Right.
can't deal with it, you can't deal with it. But to the individual, whether it's a female or a male, you want somebody who's going to love you for
Yes.
all of you.
Right.
All you, just like Christ
Yeah.
loved you through your failures.
Yes.
And there are people who can. There's a great book I was just showing Zach. It's called Body Count, and I can't remember the author. Maybe we could put it in the notes. But it was written by a pastor who married an ex-porn star.
Wow.
And he talks about, and after she gave her life to Christ, and he talks about what it was like to love somebody
Wow.
with and having to get over that history and all of those
Yeah.
things. It's a lot of work that person has to do on the other side.
For sure.
But thank God that person was able to find someone who
Right.
would love them
Yep.
through that.
Mhm.
So yeah, and if that person has a problem, they're just not the one for you. They're just
Yeah.
not the one for you.
Yeah, it's crazy, this question, because I was just speaking to a woman in between services today who she basically asked me that question. And the thing that she kept coming back to, I felt like, is she felt guilt and shame for everything that she had gone through. And I had to keep looking her in the eyes and saying, but that's not you anymore. Like, you are here. You're taking the right steps, and you need to trust and know that you will meet someone one day who will love you for who you are now. And
Yeah.
again, that's not you anymore.
Yeah.
Like, you're a different person. And like you said, you will find someone that's going to love you for who you are now. Maybe, but it is important to let them know of your past. I remember when I spoke to you for the first time, when things were getting serious, and I had that conversation with you, and I was in tears, letting you know of my past. I swore, like, you were going to be like, I didn't know that this was you. And you were like, okay, I hear you. And then you, like, told me all your stuff.
I was like, cool, so I'm not the only one. All right,
Right,
I got some
okay,
stuff I
cool.
want to share. I'm glad we're on level ground here, you know?
Yeah, because you had put me on this pedestal, and I was like, listen, you need to take that pedestal down because you need to know, like, my past. But you were so gracious in being like, yeah, but that's not you anymore. And I was able to say the same thing about you. But it was beautiful because then I was like, wow, he still wants this relationship, knowing my past. And I felt so loved.
Yeah.
So it's important that you're honest.
You and I, we did not have sex before marriage. We're not virgins when we got married. And it was great that God was able to wash away our sins and give us a fresh start, and we were able to come into it new, and it really felt like a new. At the same time, there were consequences, right? Like,
Right.
there were things that I carried with my past and
Yeah.
things that you carried with your past that brought into our relationship sexually, things that affected us. And I think that's that balance too. I'm always like, hey, I want everybody to know there's grace, there's mercy, and forgiveness.
Right.
And there's still consequences.
Yes.
And so there's both of that.
Yeah.
But one of them should not be, no one will ever love me.
Right.
Like, that's not one of those consequences. Jayleen, you were saying beforehand about the other side of it. Like, if you were dating someone and you found out, like, how would you navigate that?
Yeah, so I have current experience with that now. When I first started getting to know my now boyfriend, that was a really big part of our getting to know each other phase.
Yeah.
In the beginning, we talked about all the fun stuff, like as you do, but then he had to disclose to me things about his past. And I really respected that because it allowed me to have the decision on what I was comfortable with or not.
Yeah.
And he made it very space where it's like, hey, if this is too much, I don't blame you. Like, you can tap out, and that's okay. And I really waited to see the fruit of, okay, you say you're over this, but let me see if you actually are.
Yeah.
And his fruit has been consistent, and I've been able to really just see him for who he is now rather than who he was then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think not talking about that, kind of like to your point, of there are certain things that I had discernment about that's not my business to know about right now.
Right now.
And so I really lean on the spirit of like, what questions should I ask? I sought wise counsel too. So like I talked to you guys. I'm like, hey, this is what was shared with me. What do you think? And you guys gave me your advice. And so I think if you're on the receiving end of someone who has a past, then what are you comfortable with? What are some of your
Right.
deal breakers, your
Yeah.
non-negotiables? Only you can really decide that for yourself. But also, what are his patterns now?
Yeah.
Don't
Yeah.
look to what he did before, what she did before.
Right.
Who are they today?
Yeah.
And I think that will help.
I remember he told me something really cool, your boyfriend, when we were talking. Then he was sharing me that conversation. And then I don't think I ever told you this, but he was like, I didn't think that someone like that, because you're like the opposite.
Oh,
You've been able to stay very pure. And he was like, I didn't think someone like that could be with someone like me. And I just didn't think it would work or that she would ever want me. And then he said something, I was like, wow, this is true. He's like, but then I thought, what if God is that good?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That someone like me shouldn't have someone like that, but God is that good. And I thought someone else needs to hear that today. Like, if that's you and you wrote that question, like, God is that good.
Yeah.
He is.
You will find somebody who loves you and,
Right.
and accepts you and receives you
Yeah.
just the way you are.
What if you do have that question and you can tell that something is different afterwards? Then what do you do? Like if you're in a relationship and you spill all your guts to them and then you can just tell that they look at you different from here on out.
That's tough.
How do you handle that?
Yeah,
real.
you can't let it live in the dark. You got to bring it to the light.
Yeah.
Somebody needs to be like, hey, I can't help but notice. Now, you do have to make sure that that's not a figment of your own insecurity,
Yeah.
that you're not projecting.
True.
Because once I know you know something about me,
Yeah.
I'll be like, you're looking at it, aren't you?
Yeah.
I know
Yeah,
you
yeah, that's
are.
good.
You know what I mean? Like if I know I've got something like a pimple on my face, like everybody's
yeah.
looking at my pimple. I know everybody's looking at my pimple. It's like, no, nobody's looking at your pimple. We all have pimples.
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right. It could be the case. So after you make sure that you're not just projecting your own insecurity, then it's like, okay, well then now we need to talk about this.
Yeah.
And that's a whole we should have a whole sermon on that, just like crucial conversations with your spouse
Right.
or the person that you're dating, how to have straight up honest conversations. And then just take it from there. And if you can, and be open to the possibility. We all want things to turn out a certain way. But while you're in the dating process, that is the time to not be close-handed, but to be open-handed.
Right.
I should only have, this has to work out when I'm married. Like that should be only time when that's my mentality.
Yeah.
While I'm dating, I still have an out. I still have a way out. This doesn't have to work out.
Right.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, this is what dating is for, to figure out
figure
if this
out.
will work out.
Exactly.
And so I cannot enter in with that. So if I'm there and I'm like, oh man, I can tell something's different. Well, that's okay. This doesn't have to work out. But like, if it's going to work out, whoever you are, you have got to accept all of me. And so are you willing to have the tough, honest conversation and get the answers that you might not want to hear?
Yeah.
I think that's why it's important that you mentioned of being secure before you go into the dating phase.
Right.
Because then even if that person does feel differently
good.
about
Yeah.
you, you're like, well, I don't feel differently about me.
Right.
Because I
I
know
know
what
who I
God
am.
says about
Yep.
me.
Yeah,
Right.
that's
And
right.
having that confidence.
Yeah.
And like, I'm not going to take on guilt and shame because God set me free from that anyways.
right.
So I'm not even going to step into that.
Yeah.
Speaking of dating, the next listener question is, I've been dating, engaged for a long time, and having sex. Does this disqualify us from marriage?
Yeah, absolutely not. And so if you've been dating, engaged, and having sex, it's never too late to stop.
Right.
I have found there to be certain consequences that people, and I would have so many questions. There is no, the Bible is black and white, but every situation is also different. Like I would have questions like, all right, now how long have you been dating? Are you both Christians?
Yeah.
Did you just both come to church? Because I think that the way a Christian processes that is different than someone who's never come to church. If someone's never come to church, they've been dating, they've been engaged, and this is the first time they're hearing that God wants us to wait until marriage to have sex. Like, hey, just make the best next decision, which is, hey, we're gonna put a pause on this part of our intimacy. We're gonna wait to get married, and we're gonna re-engage in intimacy. And it could be as simple as that. When you are a believer and you are choosing to do that, I think there are repercussions we don't really think of. Like, if I'm a believer and I know that this is what God is asking, and you're a believer and you know this is what God is asking, and we are both willfully not doing what God is asking us to do, there is now planted in my subconscious this idea that you are not trustworthy.
Right, exactly. You cheated.
Because you technically have been cheating on God.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so, why do I feel like I can't trust you as much now?
You don't even realize
Because
it.
you just violated a standard that I knew you had for yourself. So
Right.
how do I know that you won't continue to violate other
Yeah.
standards?
Even though you're doing it too.
And don't do it too. And so I think there are to really come back and zoom out. God is not anti-fun. He's pro flourishing. He's pro safety.
Yeah.
He wants us to be safe. And safe sex is not about condoms, although that is important. Safe sex is about what gets in your heart. Safe sex is what gets in your soul, and so protecting it. So if that's you, disqualified from getting married, absolutely not. Like, the whole story of Christ is coming to redeem. The whole story of Christ is coming to make right what was set off. Like, you are never too far, ever too far from being made right. But you just have to put your trust and faith in Jesus. And trust and faith is not just a prayer, right, Zach? Because we talk about grace a lot and the balance a lot. I know you teach on it. It's also, and I'm going to show you that I believe by making a decision and by making an
Obedience
choice.
is everything.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's what the entire Bible is focused on, is like, if we're able to be obedient, then God's going to bless it. And
That's it.
that's when you're really going to flourish.
That's it.
Yeah.
You were talking about in your sermon about not letting desire lead you. And I think about the person who wrote this question of like, it must mean that they want to do things the right way. And that's why they're asking, what are some practical steps? Like, okay, this has been a thing. How do I not have it be a thing anymore in our relationship? Like, I might want to, but how do I actually put the boundaries that I need to be able to stop indulging in it?
I'll give one and then Liz will give some. But I would say if you're living together, living together is not sin, but it makes it really hard.
Yeah.
And some people don't have the finances to be able to live apart. So I have good friends who lived together before they got married. It was a financial decision. One stayed in one room, the other one stayed in the other room. And there was a line, and you don't cross that room. And I'm like, hey, I don't recommend it, but
Put a pin lock on your door
yeah,
or
right.
something.
The code, something like that. But if that's the scenario that has to happen for whatever reason, at the very least, I'm still assuming that this is the people that we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
Like, hey, maybe it's like, hey, you sleep in that room, I'll sleep in this room. Now, because if you can tell me that you can sleep in the same bed as someone you love and not grab the booty,
Yeah. Right.
and then
Impossible.
listen, then you need to hear another sermon.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? There's something else we gotta talk about, bro.
Yeah,
We might need some deliverance from something else. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because that's just not how God designed it.
Right, right,
Like,
right.
Yeah.
Something would have to be wrong with you
Yeah.
to not make a move. Like,
No, that's real.
so you gotta. So my one thing would be like, let's be practical about it too. Let's be
Yeah.
spiritual and let's be practical. So I'll just
Yeah.
throw that real quick. Don't live together if you are. Be in separate rooms. There's other things.
Yeah, I remember when we were youth pastors and you preached this sermon and you took the baby gate. Do you remember that? We had a baby gate.
Yeah, that
And
was
it-
here, wasn't it? Or was
No, that's when you were youth pastor. And so this was the stage, and he took, and he was
Like, the
like,
baby gates that babies are not allowed to get past.
Yeah.
yeah.
You'll have those soon.
Yeah. Ooh, we already got it on the registry. You can get it for me.
We'll get that.
Perfect.
So the baby gate, I remember you putting an illustration where you were like, how much can you, like, how close can you get to it? And you, like, you were here and you put the baby gate, like, all the way at the edge over there, only because, you know yourself. You
Right.
know what
Yeah,
can
yeah, yeah.
happen. So
Yeah.
it's like, just don't put yourself in these situations, like,
Yeah.
where, and so like you said, living together or just really late at night or just,
In the car alone.
yeah.
You got to put the boundary out. When I went to the Grand Canyon a couple years ago, I noticed something. So they don't have bars everywhere. Obviously, it's hundreds of miles, 1,000 miles. You can't. It's huge. But where the cars parked and where the most photo spots were, they had barriers, and the barriers were about 40 feet from the edge.
Yeah.
I mean, far
Yeah, yeah.
from the edge. And I'm like, because the people who they built the Grand Canyon. Because the people who are responsible for the Grand Canyon understand,
Yeah.
I'm not going to let you get close.
Yeah.
Right.
Because if you get close,
Right.
it's not that much further to the
yeah.
edge.
You can find a way.
So I'm gonna set the boundary way out here. I just think you need to be, if you're serious about purity,
Right.
Yeah.
you need to be extreme with your
Yeah.
boundaries and your lines.
Right.
Everybody's different.
Yeah.
Everybody's different. So I'm not gonna say that this is the right way, this is the wrong
Yeah,
way.
that's why.
But I will say, if you're anything like I was,
Yeah.
Yeah.
you need some extreme measures.
Right.
We wouldn't
what
talk.
they are.
We wouldn't talk on the phone past 10.
Yeah.
That was one of mine because I was like, I just feel like my conversations might shift
Yeah.
Yeah.
True.
past
yeah.
10.
Yeah.
And then especially if you're both like that.
Yeah.
Like, thank God in our relationship, Pastor Liz was much stronger than I. We were not. By the way, we said we were going to talk about this, so I'm gonna just put us out there. Last week we said we didn't hold hands for 6 months.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
But then once we started holding hands, things went a little faster.
Once we knew we were gonna get married.
Once we knew we were getting married.
That's where it.
That's where it got real hard.
Yeah, yeah, I
Because
guess-
once you knew you
'cause
get
you know,
married,
you're like,
if I'm
gonna
gonna buy it, why not taste
Yeah.
it?
Right.
And so you kind of out there. And so
that was hard.
because it was hard. And so,
You act
but
like it was so easy for me. It wasn't. It was hard.
you were just strong though.
Oh, I was.
So we were like, we never had sex. We didn't got that far.
Totally.
But things would happen.
Yeah.
But whenever I would make a move, she would slap me. Not in the face.
Yeah, yeah.
But she would like hit
And
my
not on the
hand,
booty.
And I'm the booty because that's what that's She would slap me. And I was like, thank you, Lord.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because so I'm glad that she had that extra bit of whatever it was that kept us
Yeah.
pure there.
Yeah,
But if y'all both like that, you really need some boundaries, especially if you have both already fallen into it.
Yeah.
Because now the layer of uncertainty, of shame, it's been ripped.
Yeah.
So now I can cross that barrier
Yeah.
a lot faster. And so you might have to get more extreme. You know, my youth pastor used to quote the Pringles commercial. He said, "Man, once you pop the fun, don't stop." And so
Right.
Yeah.
you have to be careful
Yeah.
that once you don't get there, that you really set those bars. And it's
Yeah.
again, it's not what God is keeping you from.
Yeah.
It's what He's leading you to and saving you from.
Right.
That needs to be the whole basis of which we frame the
Yeah.
conversation
Yeah.
on sex, because it very much feels like God is taking something from me.
Yeah. Yeah.
It very much feels like He doesn't want me to have fun.
Yeah.
And that's not it
Yeah.
at all.
Yeah,
It's Him
it's
trying
true.
to protect you, to
Yeah.
preserve you, so that you can enjoy it
Yeah.
the way that He intended it to.
I think too, I remember when we were dating and even like when we were engaged, and it was so hard. But the thing that helped me was going back to what you just said before about when you're in a relationship and you know that you're both committed to God, but like you end up having sex, then in the back of your mind, you're thinking, well, they're not very trustworthy because they made a commitment to God that they broke it. For me, I just remember I had a friend who did that. Like she was engaged and they were both Christian, and they ended up having sex before they got married. And I remember that her fiance was always really jealous over her and didn't trust her. And I'm like, I don't want that. Like, I didn't want you to not trust me.
Yeah. That's
And I also am like, I know that's going to carry into the marriage. And I just did. I wanted you to know that you could trust my relationship with
That's
God and you could trust me. So in the back of my mind, I'm like, this is not worth it.
Yeah.
This is not worth the trust being broken, because that's just going to carry into the marriage. And it helped us know that, like, if we weren't going to do that now, then when we got married, you know that you could trust me and you don't have to be so jealous over me
Yeah.
or just really controlling in any way, because you know that you could trust
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
Same with married people. And I don't know if there's a question now, but since you brought up marriage, like if someone from the opposite sex is giving you attention, or if you find yourself looking at someone of the opposite sex and they're a friend, or you really gotta like pay attention to those little warning signs in your soul and your spirit. And I would just rather be weird and awkward
Right.
than and married.
Yeah.
Than, oh, he's so funny, he's so cool, he's so comfortable, and then end up somewhere that I don't want to go.
Yeah.
Like I get accused a lot of being weird, awkward around women.
Yeah, it's true.
Around women.
Yeah, they
and, it's,
do.
and, it's, and they told you.
Yeah.
And they're like,
I'm
he's
like,
so
you
weird.
awkward. Around us, he goes.
Because I'm just like, that's not gonna be my story.
Yeah.
Right.
And so make fun of me all
Yeah.
you want.
Yeah.
But I'm just,
That's
I know what
Yeah.
matters.
Yeah.
And if I had a trade,
Yeah.
it would be that for this.
Yeah.
Right.
For sure.
Yeah.
I also think about how we talked about before of finding someone with the same convictions as you.
Mm.
Because I know other couples who they don't even kiss until they get married
Yeah.
because their convictions were in alignment. So I think if you can take that extra step, if when you're dating, I'm like, hey, this is what's off limits to me.
Yeah.
If that person didn't
Oh,
see
yeah,
eye
that's
to
a great
eye,
conversation to have.
yeah, then I think, okay, if we don't see eye to eye on the things that I want to abstain from and I want to protect myself from, then we really don't have any business in
Yeah.
moving forward. Best of luck to you.
Yeah,
But
really
finding
cool.
someone with the same
That's
convictions
great.
is huge.
Right. That's great.
So the next question is, what if my past comes to light after getting married?
Mhm.
That's tough. Let's preface it by saying, if you can control that, make sure that that's not the case.
Right.
Yeah.
But if it happens after, to the people who are married, to the one who, I'll talk to the one who said yes and didn't. You said yes.
Yeah.
And your responsibility when dating was to find out as much information as you could. And so if you made the choice to get married and say yes, it might not make sense to you. You might feel betrayed. You might feel swindled. I would say God knew what he was doing.
Yeah.
There's a real story that we have to wrestle with of Samson in the Bible when he missionary dates Delilah.
Yeah.
Which all scripture tells us not to. And then if there's a little parentheses right after it, I don't know if you remember exactly what it says, it goes, the parents were so upset that he did it to Philistine. And it says in parentheses, but they did not know that God was moving. And
Right.
God was using.
Mhm.
And he was going to use the relationship. Sorry, it wasn't Delilah. It was the Philistine woman before Delilah. But that God was using this relationship for his purposes to deliver Israel, to use Samson to deliver Israel from the Philistines. And so I'm saying something cannot be good and still be used for good.
Yeah.
God can still have an intention and a design
Right.
that you and I are unaware of.
Yeah.
I even love the fact that it was in the parentheses. We can talk about that. All the things in the Bible that we don't get to see but the author.
Yeah.
And I think about all the things in my life that don't make sense in the moment that
Yeah,
I don't get to see
so
but the
true.
author.
Yeah.
And I
So
could see the
good.
parentheses in a
Yeah.
marriage.
Yeah.
And he had no idea that she had this past. And she had no this idea. But the parentheses would say, but God knew.
Yeah.
And God was using it to deliver his
Right.
people. Like
Yeah.
there could be a purpose.
Yeah. Yeah. What if God is using that to teach you how to show grace?
Yeah.
Like if you were the person on the receiving end of that,
That's right.
how to show grace, because that's your spouse now. So what are you going to do with that? Are you going to show grace, or what are you going to do?
And if you're the person who had the secret, apologize for
Right.
having a secret.
Yeah.
And then you give that person as much space or time as they need to
Right.
process, but don't run away and don't
Yeah.
hide. You guys are one now. And so lock in, do what you got to do to love and be loved. And go to therapy, come to church, and God can do it. God can do the rest.
Next question is, how do I heal from sexual assault and learn to view sex God's way?
That's so painful. Happened to Liz when she was a child, to me when I was a child. And I know spouses who, after that, when their husband touches them, they shiver. They shudder. Because of their trauma.
Yeah.
Their trauma and that's why even when I was talking about having sex regularly last week with husbands and wives, I gave a little disclaimer and I was like, assuming health. And assuming that there's not trauma, because sometimes trauma can put a pin in that. And so definitely seek counseling, definitely seek therapy, give God an opportunity to restore it, to bring it to him, to help him rewire it. I think in any situation of trauma, you got to begin with grace. You got to give yourself the same amount of grace that God gives you. So give yourself enough grace to be broken. Give yourself enough grace to be okay with the process that he's putting you through. So I just think that's super important. I think shame is really the thing that keeps us from finding healing and coming to Jesus first and foremost. And so, whoever asked the question, I'm so glad that they asked it. I hope that we're not the only people that know that they've been assaulted. I hope that there are other people in their life, because the more you bring something into the light, the less control it has over you. The more of a secret it remains, the more power it has. So find people that you can trust. If you haven't shared it with someone yet, share it with someone, because the more you let it out, the less it stays in. My son was sharing something with us private. I won't share it, but he was like, I don't want to say it. Remember last night when you were talking to him in the room, I heard you when I was like, he's like, I don't want to say it. And she was like, well, what was it? Somebody said something mean to him. I don't want to say it. She said, why? She's like, because if I say it, I feel like it's going to hurt again on the way out. And I wanted to just hop over there. I was like her parent, but I wanted to hop over there. And be like, no, buddy, that's actually how we get there.
Wow.
That's actually how we get the hurt out. We got to see it.
Yeah,
we got to get it out of our heart. It's going to play in us. And so get it out, and then constantly bring it to what, if you're in a relationship with someone and you've been assaulted, You got to be with someone who understands you where you are and tell them, hey, this is not where I'm planning on being my whole life.
Yeah.
But can you bear with me?
Right.
Will you love me enough
Yeah.
to bear with me? And to that person, marriage is not all about sex. So if you find someone you absolutely love, who is wonderful and beautiful, and you enjoy your conversations with them, and you enjoy going out with them and hanging with them, don't let something like that keep you from what could be a God
Right.
relationship.
Yeah.
Pray about it.
Yeah.
But maybe God's giving you this measure of patience and grace to be able to use.
Yeah, I remember going through that as a child, and my biggest hurt was just, and it's so weird when you get assaulted like that too, because as a kid, I felt like if I told somebody, I was going to be in trouble for it.
Yeah, the shame comes on you.
Right, it's
Wow,
so
it's weird.
crazy,
Yeah.
that I still don't completely understand, but I just know that that's a thing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I can't tell my parents because I'm gonna get in trouble, even though it was done to me. But I think that was just the devil's way of keeping me quiet about it. But as I got older, and then it came out, and then I spoke to my parents as an adult, actually. Yeah, and it was a family member who did this, so they were like, "What?" I'm like, "Don't be upset at them. I already forgave this person." Which is another thing that you have to do. And I know we're going to be talking more next Sunday about her and touching more on some of these topics, but just forgive that person. I know that's hard. It's easy for me to just say it, but forgiveness is for you.
Yes.
100%.
It's for you to heal. It's a way for you to heal. And that's just going to help you in the healing process. So then in your next relationship, you're not carrying that hurt and think that person's going to do something like that to you and that trauma. And I could say that I am completely healed from that. It's not something that affects me in my marriage anymore. I know in the beginning it was a little difficult because it wasn't even just that. It's just previous relationships that I was in that maybe I felt taken advantage of. Maybe they didn't sexually assault me, but they did take advantage of me in some way to the point. Right, because I remember being married to you feeling like you just wanted to take from me. And that's not what you were doing, but it was because I felt that way in my past relationships, and I had to forgive those people and just let it go and, like you said, process it so that I can move on.
Yeah, that's really good.
The last question someone wrote is, I want to know more about lust in marriage with my partner. According to the Bible, is it bad?
Lust in marriage. Yeah, I heard a lot of people talk about this. I've talked about this.
We had a lot of questions
often.
about this topic.
I talk about this often, but I haven't heard a lot of pastors talk about it. Yeah, when you define lust as taking and love is giving, sex takes on another filter to process it through. And as a husband, there are things that I might want from my wife, but I cannot force those things from my wife. Because that's when I begin to take from my wife, and sex is designed to be giving. I think it's a revelation to realize that the human body, when it climaxes, as in the end of sex, it literally gives.
Yeah.
Him and her. What a picture! And by the way, when we talk about sex and marriage being an image of Christ and the church, it is not a coincidence that the church and Christ were made one by the giving of a naked body on a cross.
Wow.
Bleeding.
Yeah.
Right? Laying out fluids coming out, like just laying out. And then the church then in response then now submits. This is why Paul says, husbands, die for your wives as Christ died for the church. Wives, submit to your husbands. And then as the church submits to Christ the head, there's a dual giving. And so anytime you are in a sexual relationship with your husband or your wife, and there is something in the bedroom that one of those partners does not feel comfortable doing, and the other partner begins to manipulate emotionally to get what they want from the other person, then that's going to be lust. That's going to be taking. That's not giving. That's not serving. That's taking. Anytime a husband asks you to do something that is against scripture, that's not giving. That's taking. That's disobedience. When we talk about sex in the marriage bed, what is biblical, what is not biblical? Oral sex is in the Bible. A lot of people say they read it in the book of Song of Solomon, which is very interesting. When it comes to a third party, that's definitely not in the Bible. And so those are really things that the Bible makes clear. Two become one, not three, not four. And so, my barriers are this. Here's my boundaries. If he's okay with it, she's okay with it, and it's not something that scripture explicitly bans, like a third party, like pornography, those things, then if they're both okay, then it's okay. I think that there needs to be health implications, things you need to look for. There's probably things you do in bed that's probably not very healthy for you. So you want to take care of your body. But yeah, she's got to be okay with it. He's got to be okay with it. And one person feels uncomfortable, you do not push because you are not taking, you're giving. And it's hard, man. It's hard when you're a guy waiting for your wife to give something without asking or taking. Now, here's what that doesn't mean. That doesn't mean that you don't communicate
Right.
how you're feeling.
Right.
And so, so I communicate to you often. I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, so how about?
How about?
And then, but you have the green light to say what?
No.
And I have no right
Right.
to be mad
Right.
at that.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how it works.
Yeah.
And the same with you. You'll communicate to
Yeah.
me, and I have the right to say no,
Yeah.
because it's my body.
Right.
But I lay it down for you when I can. I do. And then there's that kind of relationship, kind of
Yeah.
give and exchange. We figured out ways to make sure that it's regular.
Mhm.
Right, we have like a goal that we try and hit.
Right.
Our goal is twice a week.
Yep.
We try to hit, and
We do it, you mean?
we do it. Come on, girl.
We do it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Takes this podcast. So
Yeah.
long.
Cool.
We're gonna need a rating on this podcast. But the way it works is you decide when those 2 days are.
Right.
So it gives you that measure of control.
Right, because he has more of the, what would you call that?
I don't know.
The
What would you
modesty.
call it?
Okay.
But you sometimes, yeah.
I don't know what happened after.
Especially since you hit 40.
I don't know.
Husbands, hold on. Something happens at 40. I'm gonna tell you right now. It's another level.
Gym too.
I wish people would ask questions about that, but yeah, does that answer that question? Is there more you want to add? Lusts in marriage?
No, I think that's it. You hit it right. Like, just, give them the liberty to say no, but then still communicate it. And like getting back to what I was saying before about like, because of my past relationships and everything, feeling like you were just going to take from me. It took a while for me to realize, like, even when you're asking me, you're not trying to take from me. And I had to get to a place where I trusted you enough. It was like little by little, I trusted you enough to be like, okay, I'm all right with this now.
Yeah.
Because I was okay in my heart. Like you're preaching about, it starts with your heart, and I'm okay in my heart. So I'm okay with this because I trust you. Yeah. So I think you have to just wait for your spouse to be okay with it. And they might never be okay with it. And you have to be okay with that too, with certain things that you do.
Yeah, you gotta be okay with that.
Right.
Because the relationship needs to be
Right.
bigger than that. So
Right.
I will say this, don't say it's lust if you want to do it but they don't.
Yeah.
That's not lust. That is, there's a lot of sacrifice. I think I said this before. Of the times that you and I have sex, probably 30% of the time, we both want to have sex at the same time. And it's usually like either a date night or like anniversary or on vacation. Those are the only times. But usually I'm going through something, you're going through something.
Mhm.
The other person wants to do it 70% of the time. And you're like, I love you.
Right.
Because I love you. I'm
Right.
going to serve you. I'm going to give. So it's the person's asking you. If your spouse is asking you, hey, can we have sex? They'll be like, it's lusting. Did you hear the podcast? You can't ask. You're taking from me. No, that's not what dating is. Dating is
Yeah.
emotional manipulation to get something sexually from your spouse.
Yeah.
That's
So since we talked about it inside of a marriage,
Yeah.
what about looking outside? So if somebody is married
Yeah.
and they're lusting over somebody else,
That's a great question.
how do you transfer that?
Yeah, so I wrestled with lust. I wrestled when I was single. I wrestled when I'm married. My wife knows she's a big part of the process, big part of our healing process. The book that we're hopefully be releasing a month from now will have a lot of our journey in that. And I think that, well, one, if you're single, try and defeat it while you're single. But when you're married, you got to cut off the resources that beast called desire is feeding off of. And so we have some tools. I use this thing called IMDb. So I get to check not just the rating of the movie, because I have no problem personally with like violence or things like that, but or language. But definitely because I understand that I wrestle with lust,
Right.
I refuse to watch a movie that has any sex scenes in it, that has any nudity in it. So before I watch the movie, I'll check to see.
Sometimes I check it for you.
Yeah, or sometimes you'll check it
Yeah.
for me before you show it on date night. Yeah, you
Right.
pick it. You'll do the check before you pick
Yeah,
it.
the parent's guide.
When I go to the gym, I go to the gym without my glasses on
Yep.
Wow.
because I can use the blurry vision. It's helpful. to not be able to see things.
Running
You
into
don't,
weight.
you don't fall off the treadmill or anything?
Off the treadmill.
You don't
no,
use the
man.
treadmill.
Okay,
Don't.
okay.
And then I'll say the other
We
thing
don't get on that.
Yeah.
I'll do cardio, bro.
Yeah, just lift weights.
Yeah. Cardio
No,
sucks.
no, you got into
I'm
cardio.
getting better. I actually have a
Treadmill.
treadmill desk now.
Ooh.
writing
I thought about
sermons.
getting
Okay.
one of
So I'll do
those.
like 2 miles for every
You don't trip?
2 points.
No.
No, I'm up to number 2
That's
speed on
good.
it.
Come
Wait,
on.
Yeah.
You're a multitasker.
So I try, man. Well, I'm pretty good at walking without thinking.
Yeah.
So, and then the
Anyway.
other thing is that I'm very honest now with my wife, and that has
Yes.
come
That's
through
good.
our
Very
journey
honest.
through
Yeah.
my battle with pornography.
Mm.
So even if I look at another woman, which
Right.
I try not to, but there are moments where my flesh takes over and
Yeah.
I give in. Liz has 100% green light to ask me what question.
Yeah. Did you look at that girl?
That's right.
Yeah.
And I have to
love that.
answer in that
Yeah.
moment,
Yeah.
yes or no.
Yeah.
And the reason why I can answer yes or no is because I already know how you're going to respond.
Right.
And so if you're in a relationship, your spouse can be a really big helper in your process of vulnerability, because most of the time we're afraid to be honest because we're afraid of what's going to be on the other side of that honesty. But Liz actually has a pre-packaged answer that I know I'm going to get if I say yes, I
Right.
did. If I say no, I didn't, and that's it, it's over. But if
Yeah.
I say yes, I did, then she says,
Yeah. So whenever you tell me that, if he tells me, yeah, I looked at that girl, I'll tell him like the honest answer is that hurts. Whenever you do that, that hurts. It's just a reminder to him like what you did hurt me, but that's not you. That's not really who you are. Like
Yeah.
look at him in the eyes and be like, that's not who you are.
and I love you and I forgive you.
Right.
And that helps me because the love, the forgiveness, the acceptance, but also even the hurt, because that is where the line is drawn between forgiveness and enablement.
Yeah.
So she's not enabling me by letting me, not by letting me. She's not enabling
Not saying
me.
it's okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she's saying, no, that hurt,
Yeah.
Yeah.
which I need to feel that hurt.
Yeah.
Right.
Because when I understand that I'm hurting somebody I love,
Yeah.
Yeah.
it gives another taste to my lust. Because again, we think that our lust is just hurting them or just hurting us, but it's actually hurting them. It's
Yeah.
hurting the people that you love. It's hurting
Yeah.
your spouse, hurting your kids, your future kids.
Yeah.
We are not the only ones who pay for our sin.
Right.
Yeah.
Everyone who loves us does.
Yeah.
So true.
And so so that has been a real big factor.
Yeah.
Being honest
Yeah.
with your spouse
Right.
is the way you come out of
Right.
wrestling with pornography, masturbation,
good.
lust.
Yes.
It's
Radical
keeping the
honesty.
line
Yeah.
open. We call it radical accountability.
Yeah.
That's good.
Radical accountability. It's
Yeah.
the idea that we jump into in the book, but that
Yeah.
really is it. And it took many years to get to
Yeah.
that place.
But and it also helps on my side of, being married to someone who's struggled with this before, because then I know, like, I don't have to, like, I don't carry bitterness, because I think the problem is that if you're the spouse of someone who deals with that, is that in the back of your mind, you're always thinking, like, is he looking at her? What is he doing?
Yeah.
And it's like, I have that liberty to just ask him. And a lot of the times the answer is no. And I'm like, okay, that was just in my head.
Yeah.
And then there's times
Yeah.
where the answer is yes. And I was like, oh, okay, so that's what I thought.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
then at least we're able to squash it, because
Yeah.
I'm like, that hurt,
Mhm.
but that's not you. I'm speaking, I'm telling him the truth about my hurt, but I'm speaking life into him. And then we move on.
Yeah.
And then I know that I could trust him, because when I ask him, he's going to tell me the truth.
And I know I can trust you with my honesty because I know the answer I'm gonna get. Like ladies or guys, like you gotta be consistent in the way you respond.
Right.
Because
Ooh,
some people be
that's
like,
key.
yeah, I was looking.
Yeah.
Well, don't you? And that, and it's like,
happened.
be
That's happened.
careful.
Yeah,
And
That's how we came up with that statement, because I was,
yeah,
Yeah.
and then you were like, babe, I
You're
want to be
making it
honest with-
unsafe to be
right. I want to
honest.
be honest
Yeah.
with you, and then I'm like, so what am I gonna say?
I
'Cause have to
can't be
tell you.
honest if I think you're
Yeah.
gonna take the
Right.
kids and go sleep at your mom's house. Like
Okay.
I need to be able
Yeah.
to know that you're gonna
Right,
keep me accountable.
Right.
Yeah.
That hurts me.
right,
Yeah.
That's not you.
Yeah.
But also
Speak life.
finish with,
right.
and I love you,
Yeah.
and I forgive
Yeah.
you.
So that was something we
and
came up to
Yeah.
together.
And I walk
That's a good
away
practice.
feeling like
Yeah.
I gotta do better
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
because she loves me,
Right.
Yeah.
Sure.
and it's how we're changed
Right.
Yeah.
through the love of God.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
This has been so helpful, guys. Thank you for your insight. What do we have to look forward to next week?
Next week we are speaking a tag team message
Come on.
Let's go.
called "Picking Up the Pieces."
Yeah.
We're gonna talk about what to do with a broken heart.
Right.
And so we're going to be talking about broken heart. If you're single, going through a breakup, if you've been divorced and you need to find life after divorce, if you've been a widow
Right.
and you lost somebody, or if you have a spouse who just opened up about being unfaithful,
Right.
adultery or pornography, and now you're in this whole "what do I do next" kind of thing.
Yeah.
We're going to try and give some best practices
Right.
for healing and moving on from that.
great.
That
Looking forward
sounds
to it.
great. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it as well. But you do not have to wait till next week to get encouragement. I want to encourage you to go on our app, our Journey Church app, to get a community, to be able to get daily encouragement through there. Or you can follow us on our Instagram at JourneyORL and just be a permanent part of the Journey Church family. And if you're watching this on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe to continue getting content that will help you in your journey with Christ. We'll see you guys next week. Bye, everyone.
See you then.